Hi, everyone, and welcome to another live edition of the Ethicast, coming to you from Atlanta, Georgia at the 16th Annual Global Ethics Summit. We're also saying hello to everybody who's attending virtually from around the world. We're so glad you could be here with us. This is a terrific episode. I've been really looking forward to this one because we have as our guest for this episode, Dr. Katharina Weghmann from EY. Katharina, it's so good to see you again. I've had the pleasure of publishing you in Ethisphere magazine before. And before I even get started, before I forget in the heat of the moment, I just want to draw attention to the fact that we have a wonderful article from EY. It's going to appear in the April edition of Ethisphere magazine. It's going to drop at the end of the month. It's all about speak up culture. I'll talk about it again, but I want to make sure we get that out in front before I forget, before we get into our conversation.
Amazing.
Here.
Thank you so much, Bill.
So, Katharina, my first question for you is, it feels like we're in the midst of an ethics crisis between geopolitical tensions and the erosion of multilateral efforts to uphold commonly agreed upon points of law. How serious do you feel that this crisis is currently? How serious do you feel like it's likely to become? And most importantly, how can organizations look at this moment to form short and long-term strategies to navigating what we're all going through right now?
Wow, it's a really loaded question. Thank you for
is.
that. No, I think it's amazing that you're making this point, because that's one point that me and my team, we're incredibly passionate about, to recognize this current moment in time and to recognize the many challenges that organizations, in particular executive leadership, are facing at this point, because there's no such thing as certainty anymore. There's no such thing as strategic alliances and public-private partnerships in the way that we have seen in the past. And so we're really struggling to reconcile, like, what's our role of business and society. And I think it's like a real stress test for executives and leaders to understand, what role do we play in society, and do we want to play a role in society? And if that's the case, if we think, yes, we should play a role in society on like the bigger challenges, let's say access to health, access to medicine, like all these topics that are incredibly important to us as society, like, what do we want to do as leaders, like, moving forward, given that we are in this particular environment? And I honestly think that, like, this type of community that we have built here around us, and that's together here on those 2 days, we should have more conversations around this, what your role is in society as an organization, and also what do you want to stand for, right? Like, values aren't some like empty platitude that you can just put on a paper. The question is, where do you draw the line? And where do you also stand up for what you believe in? And so I think this is the moment where you can truly make a huge difference in like stepping up your role as a corporate citizen. And also, and to your second point was, or the second part of your question was, how can you maybe also strategically align within your industry, or strategically align across the board with other executives who are going to be in the exact same situation as you are in? And I think that's something that we are not seeing as much as I would like to see if we just look at a macro level, in order to really double down on our multilateral efforts, public-private partnerships, and stepping up our role in, hey, we can close that void with our corporate responsibility. We can close that void by having like an ethical stance on some of the most important issues that we all are really bought into. And so I think at the end of the day, it's a huge opportunity for companies to really step up and align with each other. Because values, again, like one thing that everybody is talking about recently is like, we should just stick to our values and we'll be fine. Well, values means that you really have to make also some sacrifice. It means that you really have to sacrifice in the short run something for standing up for those values that you truly have operationalized in your organization. And so I think this is like the moment in time where we are going to see, is it an ethics crisis, or maybe the biggest opportunity we have ever seen for ethics to evolve to a whole other level. So I would love to hear what you think, where we are.
Well, you know what? We often talk about the power of values-based leadership as a major fulcrum for, setting the tone within an organization, and also giving departments like ethics and compliance the fuel they need, both formal and informal, to really make the biggest difference they can. And it seems like right now, values-based leadership has never been more important or more visible than I've seen in my professional history, for certain. And I think we're seeing moments, especially in the United States, where we've seen organizations really step up and take that opportunity to go, you know what? We have a set of values we've always lived by. These have governed our actions, and they now happen to be in stark, contrast to what we're seeing in the environment. And we just want to remind people, there's how certain things are. This is how we are. These are the standards by which we live. And they kind of put paid to the notion of, I once, my grandmother used to tell me, values don't mean anything until they hurt, and I think there are organizations saying we are willing to endure a certain level of discomfort or a certain level of unpopularity, because that's what it's going to take to make sure our values actually are what they say they are. And I think employees really notice that. They understand that, and they very much understand when those values no longer are being upheld in an earnest way. And it's very fascinating to see organizations that are thriving in that respect right now, and they're seizing that moment you talked about, and organizations that have backed away and are feeling the pain and perhaps are already suffering some pretty sharp regret from that decision. So it's quite an interesting time.
Yeah, and maybe if I can add one more point, I think
Please, yeah.
what organizations really need to understand is they shouldn't walk that path alone, right?
Yes.
I mean, you can only lose if you're not going to have strategic alliances or industry-based
Yes.
like alliances or maybe private public partnerships that set you up for success in the long run. I think you're making an excellent point. You don't want to be a target, or you don't want to like ostracize yourself and sacrifice yourself for maybe something that you won't even win. So you're always stronger if you have a strategic alliance. You're always stronger when you align based on those values and then organize. And that really is something that we should see more. But of course, a really difficult task. I'm not even underestimating how difficult this is to navigate, but still, we'll see where this goes.
Well, speaking of navigational difficulties, my next question for you is that, companies increasingly are finding themselves caught between political and legal expectations, especially with regards to living up to their stakeholder expectations. To what degree should organizations be using ethics as the lens to interpret these sometimes conflicting challenges and opportunities of the present moment?
Yeah, I love that question. I mean, to be honest with you, I think it's incredibly difficult to even navigate between the legal and the political at this point. And there's no right or wrong. And I think that's something we really need to recognize, that we're living in a time, and that's always been true when we think about it as an ethics lens. But we're living in a time where they're really, due to the complexities and the adversity that we're facing as executives, there will be no right or wrong. And you know how we in ethics, we always talk about doing the right thing, doing the right this, doing the right that. And I think this ethics lens will really add an additional lens to complex situations that organizations are facing right now.
Yeah.
Because we create that space in which we are comfortable to talk about the many wrongs that there are on the spectrum of those decisions that executives have to face right now. And I feel like this is why ethics could be an incredibly important and valuable lens on boards, but also when in the C-suite, when they have organizational meetings, like whether that's committee meetings or just regular meetings, that ethics has a real voice in these conversations. And we shouldn't be as limited to just having a corporate defense or like a regulatory compliance lens to this, but really giving that space to, hey, in a world where everything is possible, or in a world where there are opportunities and risks, where could we land when we think about this from an ethical perspective? And I think that's something we can see much, much more. And also it gives us like much broader outcomes and business outcomes that will like benefit you in the long run. Because if we just look from a legal or political perspective, you're very much caught in the short run, or you're very much caught in like a binary right or wrong type of situation. When in fact ethics could be like the perfect addition to having a dialogue and like really having diverging views, and then figuring out, hey, maybe there is a solution that we never even thought about before. And so that's where I think this could be like a really powerful way in which ethics professionals could contribute in a very meaningful way.
Yes. The tagline for the show is "Strong ethics is good business."
Amazing.
And I really love that, that business context. That's a really good. There's the right and the wrong, but ultimately, when we talk about business ethics, we're talking about ethics in the context of business risk. And how do you and risk is always, peril and opportunity meeting at that same razor's edge. And so ethics is a great way to walk that line in a way that builds maximum value and maximum market differentiation for your organization. So I love where you're coming from with that. My third question for you is about speak up. And a healthy speak up environment is critical for a strong culture and for a high performing organization. And yet it feels that for various reasons in the environment we're in right now, organizations there are lots of opportunities for this chilling effect to sort of descend upon their employees when it comes to speaking up and calling out misconduct when they see it. What are your thoughts and recommendations on how organizations can recognize the current environmental challenges to speak up culture, and how can they improve their own efforts to make sure that they advance speak up culture in general, given the moment that we're in?
Yeah, difficult question. How much time do we have?
That's what I do.
Seriously. I think I maybe want to start with a personal note that
Sure.
I don't know if you knew this, but my doctoral dissertation was on whistleblowing and whistleblowers post-financial crisis. So I was
Yeah.
talking to whistleblowers who were speaking up as part of or leading up to the financial crisis 2007 and
Yes.
2008. And why I'm bringing this up in response to your question is I think leaders should really recognize that we can learn a lot from the past. We can learn a lot from scandals in the past. We
Yeah.
can learn a lot from mistakes that happened collectively in our industries. And so that's something that I think we're not aware of enough, that we are now having like the same undercurrent and the same type of dynamics at play that we had in various other scandals leading up to maybe some unfortunate like unfolding of events.
Sure.
And so I think right now we need to recognize that we are almost like at an inflection point or tipping point where employees probably will not feel comfortable right now to speak up the way they probably did like a year or 2 or 3 years ago.
Right.
We're in an environment where psychological safety maybe is like under real threat, given that not everybody's voice is being heard, or not everybody is supposed to be like included in certain discussions. And I feel like the psychological safety and the ethical climate that we need to create right now has to be one of the most important efforts that leaders have to do right now in order to make sure that they get their early warning signals of risk within the organizations, but B, and I think that's another one, create spaces in the organization to make sure you can still cultivate speak up, and you can cultivate feedback cultures, and you can normalize speak up in a time where outside of the organization, maybe you don't have that same comfort, or you don't have the feeling that you're psychologically safe to say what you really think or observe or feel.
Yeah.
And so how can we create those spaces and be very intentional about this? I think is incredibly important at this point, because I think over time you're going to lose a lot of your employees and a lot of the feedback that's maybe necessary for you to navigate those risks and also get those early warning signals. And
yeah, I love that you mentioned psychological safety. I mean, it's scary out there right now. As we are recording this, the world markets are in the middle of a frankly shocking sell-off, and it's very scary out there. And I think when organizations look at their own psychological safety, it's not just what the feel is inside the house. It's also what world do their employees live in that they're bringing into the house every single day. And that challenge is only going to get more difficult right now. So it really behooves organizations to take these things seriously, to treat these as strategic objectives, and to really look at how do you build a long-term dedication to this, so that the employees know that even if the world is uncertain, life within the organization can be certain, and their culture can be certain. And that builds true strength, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And to be honest with you, I'm really excited about where we are at this point.
Yeah.
Because ethics professionals and people who have been in this business for a really long time, they have a real opportunity to basically say, listen, guys.
Yeah.
Like during the good weather, like this was good, like being on paper, and let's see if we just like talking and not really like playing the game. We're just talking the game.
Yep.
And now we can just put some real action behind and see how are we stepping up, and what are we doing with this ethics? Is it just like an esoteric concept that everybody says it is? Or can we apply it into practice and really make a huge difference, not just to our organizations, but society at large?
Indeed. Well, Katharina, it's been so wonderful having you on the show. Thank you very much for coming on and sharing your insights with us. Before I let you go, where can people go to learn more about what we've been talking about today?
Yeah, of course, they can follow us on LinkedIn. Feel free to follow us or send an invite, but also ey.com. We have our latest pieces there. And of course, they can go to Ethisphere and check out some of the latest pieces we have there.
Indeed. Well, EY appears in Ethisphere magazine pretty regularly. And of course, I want to say again, we have a wonderful article on Speak Up Culture from EY. It's going to appear in the spring issue of our magazine that drops at the end of April. So we want to make sure everybody who's watching this, please make sure to take a look at that magazine. We will be sure to link to that when that magazine goes live. But in the meantime, again, Katharina, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Bill. It was a pleasure to be here, and let's have some more fun in Atlanta.
Indeed. This has been a special live edition of the Ethicast, coming to you from the 16th Annual Global Ethics Summit. I'm your host, Bill Coffin. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again next time. Bye now.